Assalamu alaikum. This is Layla Abdullah-Poulos, and welcome to NBA Muslims. This is a very impromptu online discussion. Some things that have been happening over the weekend with some things that an old interview by DJ Khaled that popped up, and he said a few things that were disturbing about sexual exchange in his marriage, and it kind of like threw everyone like in Muslim culture in all kinds of directions. So what I did was I managed to snag Habiba Akande, Islamic scholar and author of A Taste of Honey, Sexuality and Erotomology in Islam, so that we can kind of discuss some of the things that he said and what's been happening on social media and some of the conversations about sexual equity and mutual gratification of partners. So a little bit about Habib. Habib Akande is a British-born writer and historian of Nigerian descent, a former student of Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. He's the author of 5 published nonfiction books on race, Islamic history, and erotic Muslim literature, including A Taste of Honey, Illuminating Darkness, and Illuminating the Blackness. Habib is currently working on an upcoming book about women's sensuality from an African perspective entitled Kunyaza, The Secret of to Female Pleasure, which I'm still waiting on, by the way. Still waiting on that book, brother. When is that coming? And you need it now
Inshallah.
more than ever.
No, inshallah this year, but obviously I'm gonna let you know first and foremost because obviously you're gonna help me with that book, inshallah, before it's
Inshallah.
released.
So DJ Khaled. All right. This was an old interview that came up and kind of caught people's attention because of something that he said in particular about sexual exchange that he has with his wife.
Should I play it now?
Yes. Oh, you're gonna play it? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think we
Please
can
play
play
it.
it.
Everyone, we're gonna listen to it. If you can stomach it again.
I believe a woman should praise the man, the king.
Oh, sorry.
Listen back.
Technical. So that was another link that opened up. I do apologize. I'll play it. Sorry, we'll start
It's
now.
all right. The music was better than the stuff that he was saying.
Sorry. Okay, here we go.
I believe a woman should praise the man, the king. If you hold it down for your woman, I feel like the woman should praise, and the man should praise the queen. But my way of praising is called how was dinner? You like the house you living in? You like all the clothes you getting? I'm taking care of your family. I'm taking care of my family. Put in the work.
So you say you don't go down?
Nah, never.
All of that to say you don't go down? Come on.
You eat the box.
Come on, Khaled.
Oh, you ain't no
God. I thought that's what Hold You Down was about.
Nah, well, I don't. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I mean, life, but you tried it, didn't like the taste?
I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't.
Not even like for her birthday?
Nah, listen,
Christmas?
She gets, I put in that work. My work is great. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do my
so if she told you she don't do that, is that okay?
Nah, it's not okay. Because you know what I'm saying?
I'm confused. So
you gotta understand, I'm the Don, I'm the king. You know what I'm saying?
And she's
Everybody's
the queen.
the king of the house. Huh?
She's the queen.
Of course.
So
I don't do that.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
It's different rules. You're saying, you gotta understand, like, we you know what I'm saying? So there's some things that y'all might not want to do or want to do. It gotta get done. You know what I'm saying? I just can't do what you want me to do. I just can't.
Okay.
Damn, Khaled, you messed up.
Okay, so that's a snippet of DJ Khaled's comments.
Yes. There are a few things there. Okay. And I would like to kind of start with this whole idea of how he delineated a woman honoring her man and a man honoring his woman. Okay, so he uses these terms, kings and queens. Okay, which is a common term, which is commonly used among really blacks and people of African descent. So I was particularly disturbed by, first and foremost, when he said that the woman should honor the man because he's holding it down and because he's providing, which is not something that is necessarily in and of itself problematic. But when he turned around and said the man should honor the woman, he started outlining things that he did, not any showing any kind of appreciation for what his wife does. And so it feeds into this whole idea of giving value to monetary and things that men may be doing as providers. And so it gives value to those types of economics and those types of metrics without giving real value to anything that a woman or a wife may provide. And so it really leads to a an oppositional kind of way of thinking about valuing one partner over the other partner. And he demonstrates that because he did not say, "Oh, well, my wife's is a great wife. She takes care of me. I don't have to worry about having people in my home that I don't want in my home. She, you know, when I'm, she supports me emotionally, and I don't know whether or not they have kids. You know, just anything that the wife may provide is totally not brought up at all. It's all about him. It's all about the king, and this whole idea that if you provide things monetarily, those are the things to be valued and nothing else.
Yes, I do agree, but I want to, in a way, play a bit of. I don't get me wrong. I disagree with what he said, but I can understand the mindset. And
Okay.
since obviously the interview was these comments was resurfaced, obviously I think last week. I've had a number of discussions with both my male and female friends in terms of what they think about what he said.
Mm-hmm.
Interestingly enough, a number of women find obviously these comments disgusting, deplorable, and how can you say such a thing? Whereas amongst a number of men, both Muslim and non-Muslim, some didn't feel no issue with what he said, and some actually even agreed with him. And I will try and explain their rationale of why they think that what he said was okay, because the way they understood it, the way they articulated themselves was, for example, as a man, obviously he's a wealthy man, he's a music producer, he's a multimillionaire, and and again, for a lot of men, he can get not any woman he wants, but a number of women. So the way a lot of guys rationalize it in the way they articulated it to me was, he can get any woman that he likes. The woman that his current wife, she should be pleased to be with him because of what he brings to the table in terms of financial stability, luxurious lifestyle. Again, I'm not saying I agree with this, but this is how.
Just keep going. Just keep going. It's fine.
So how they look at it is like, if I'm giving you a luxurious lifestyle, you're able to live, you know, like a queen, or, you know, like a princess. And even what I bring to the table in terms of in the bedroom, if it's B minus, for example, so I'm fulfilling my duties every now and again, but I'm not going down on you. So I'm not a real master in the bedroom. So I'm not fulfilling all of the things I could be doing for you. But overall, when you look at, I'm giving you A plus lifestyle plus even if I'm a B minus or even a C in a bedroom, it's only fair if you're like A plus in the bedroom. That's how some men understand it. They don't look at it like it's unfair, because again, like I said, they will look at like he's bringing more to the table because he is in a position in which that he, as much as some women might look at it and say he's not attractive and things like that, that's subjective. And the reality is, when you're famous and powerful, you do have a lot of women, attractive women, who have flocked to him. I'm sure that's the case. So the way he might look at it and the way he might understand it is that this is not, I'm speaking specifically about his wife, but what he's doing, what he's providing for his wife, a lot of women would love that. So that's why he mentioned, the way he praises her is, how are you enjoying the foods? Are you enjoying the house that you're living in? Are you enjoying all of these material things? Because he might be surrounded by a lot of material women who that's what they desire. So he, as far as in his mind, if I'm fulfilling those desires, which again, not all women, but some women that he might be accustomed to, and that's also, we have to take into consideration that he's a music producer that's been in the music industry for the last 15, 20 years. And we know the music industry is there's a lot of shallow people around, and even his interactions with a number of women, if, for example, of the women he's coming across are very shallow, materialistic, then in his mind, as long as he's providing a woman with the material needs that she desires, he's fulfilling her desires. So therefore, she should be how could she compensate him? And if he wants extra, shall we say, special attention, like oral stimulation, he might think that he's well within his regards to receive that. But in terms of the other way around, and again, some men do not equate cunnilingus with fellatio. So some men are like, okay, for a woman to give me fellatio, it's fine. Whereas for me to perform cunnilingus, I'm not going to do it because some men think it's unhygienic. Again, I don't agree with this. I'm just, again, explaining the mentality of a number of men who agree with that type of what Khaled was saying.
Mm-hmm.
There's some taboos, like he did mention, it wasn't in the snippet, but he did mention that that's not something that I do. Like, maybe something culturally where he's from. Obviously, we know he's of Palestinian origin, and it's a number of Arabs do not think that even for a woman to perform fellatio is acceptable, or a man to perform cunnilingus. So, and also he did mention that I might as well be Jamaican. We don't do that, and obviously being from the UK, and we've got a large Jamaican community. A lot of Jamaican men will say similar to what Khalid said, that they wouldn't perform cunnilingus because you're known as a bowl cat and it's seen as a deplorable thing for a man to do such an act. But for a woman to provide a similar,
a ball cat. What's a ball cat?
Bowl cat, BOWCAT. So that's like a bowl cat is a man who performs cunnilingus, and amongst a lot,
there's a slur attached to it.
It's a slur, yeah. It's something that even for me growing up, you wouldn't want to be seen as a bowl cat, and people would say things like, if a man's got pink lips, it's because you've been eaten out, so therefore you should stop doing that. So it wasn't something that people took pride in. No, honestly,
such a trip.
But my point,
I understand. I'm just like, better such a trip. Are these Muslim men that are saying these things?
They still carry. And also, just the last thing I'd like to say before you continue is that we also have to understand, again, from a number of Jamaicans as well, the reason why some people are against a man performing oral stimulation on his female partner is because they believe it's a form of sodomy. Now, under the original understanding in Christianity of sodomy, it includes both anal intercourse as well as oral stimulation. Obviously, from the Islamic perspective, we look at sodomy just being anal intercourse. But you've got to understand that when they look at, for example, the Bible and it speaks against sodomy, their understanding for a number of Christians, it includes both anal intercourse as well as whether it's cunnilingus or fellatio. So again, I can understand why some men have these hang-ups, but what I think was very problematic with what Khalid said was the double standards, the sexual double standards, that not only did he say that he expects her to do it, there's some things that are like there's different rules for men and women. I think that's, if he articulated himself better, I don't think people might have, he definitely wouldn't have received such an outrage. Again, if he said that I'm not comfortable doing this, but if my wife wants to do that, then that's fine. I don't think there'll be much outrage, but I think it's just the way it was like he expects his wife to fulfill these needs for him, but he's not going to reciprocate. And I think that's where there's a big issue, because I think a lot of men, we look at our pleasure as more important than the female pleasure. And that's because we don't have many discussions about female sexuality and female pleasure. So for a lot of men's understanding, as long as he's, again, fulfilling her material needs in terms of buying her a nice house, jewelry, clothes, and this, that, and the other, she should be pleased that he's fulfilling his duties in the bedroom without trying to, go into bit. So I'll let you finish, because I'll let you continue, because I've been speaking quite long now.
No, it's fine. I just think I know that he did not say in the clip that, oh, he didn't do it because he was Muslim. But when you have someone with such notoriety and such a large platform, it definitely will carry over into different realms, different social spheres. And it definitely carried over into the Muslim social sphere, because you're saying to me that there are Muslim men that are saying, what was wrong with what he said. It's okay. It's perfectly okay with what he said. The whole idea is that I'm providing materially, and because I provide materially, then your agency as a partner in this relationship is diminished, okay? Because I'm the one that provides materially, which is anti-ethical with Islamic teachings, but it's something that exists in Muslim culture. And he has identified as a practice of, I think he said in one interview, a devout Muslim. And so it's definitely going to carry over. Muslims who see him are going to see him saying that stuff as a Muslim male. And unfortunately, it's something that is, from what you're saying, is common among Muslim men. And here's the problem with that. Okay.
Sorry, sorry.
A
Can I
lot,
just interject?
yeah.
Can I just read the tweet of a Muslim? I think it's a person, a Muslim, and it's going to agree with basically what you said. The person said, Khalid has to say this. He is a Muslim. Because of his stature, he cannot publicly announce that he actually gives head, i.e., performs cunnilingus. In his world, the mouth and tongue are used for recitation of the Quran and for the remembrance of Allah. That is the Islamic way.
Yeah,
So
but
you see,
Muslim women recite Quran too.
exactly. No, exactly. No, no, exactly, and that's the point. It's this number. It's that this person. There's a number of men who think this way that it's not allowed because, and we speak about the Islamic position with regards to oral simulation. But he was saying that Khalid has to say this because again, oral simulation is against Islam. But he didn't say anything about his wife performing oral sex on him.
Exactly.
And again, it's
Exactly.
double standards. That's why even we need to challenge. And before we continue, I just want to commend you for organizing this and having this discussion because I think it's important, especially as a Muslim woman, that you're spearheading this. Because again, I'm sure that many people that's listening, I definitely am one of those people, are grateful for what you're doing. I think it's important that not only Muslim men but Muslim women in particular continue to have these conversations. And when we as Muslim men we say some things which are which is wrong and disrespectful, again, that we need to be checked. You need to challenge us. I just want to publicly commend you for what you're doing and just
Oh,
hope, inshallah, just encourage you to continue doing this type of kind of conversations because it's much needed.
alhamdulillah. But I think that the that tweet in particular, which is one of many, and from what I understand, you've gotten a lot of direct messages. I've gotten direct messages from women, and there's definitely a problem. There's a huge problem with the expectation of a kind of subjugation of Muslim women. Uh, when I hear scholars use the word submissive, okay, I cringe because submissive has a very specific connotation, and so it goes through a Muslim woman's life, and so in her married life she's expected to have this submissiveness, and the whole reason behind this submissiveness is this idea is that he provides financially. So hearing Muslim men are saying, well, I pay for the bills, I pay the bills, so you should be happy with that and not and tolerate my incompetence in the bedroom. It's not A game or B game, it's incompetence and it's negligence, and it has very specific physical and psychological and emotional effects on the partner that is being left in the lurch. Okay. And it'll affect the marriage across the board. If, and just like Muslim men, the thing that you have got to understand is that if your partner isn't satisfied, there's not enough DJ Khaled, Kanye West, Bill Gates money in the world, okay, that's going to repair the damage that you caused someone that you supposedly love and you're sharing your life with because you choose to be incompetent and negligent and complacent in it. So the best thing to do is to stop that and sit back and learn what it is you need to do as a sexual partner. And that's in direct accordance with the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who said that, if she is not satisfied, it's not over. So now that it's the just the notion that there are Muslim men out there that don't feel like they have a mandate to satisfy their partners sexually because somehow they're shelling out money, and most of you are not making DJ Khaled money, so let's just be real about it. Okay. It is ludicrous. It is absolutely ludicrous, and it leads to a lot of dysfunctions inside and outside of the bedroom because a dissatisfied sexual partner, things are going to manifest in other ways. So if you find that your marriage is having a lot of problems, and you know that you are being incompetent in the bedroom, you may want to look to that first and foremost. So this idea that just because he makes the money, that means that he deserves uh, uh, to have more privilege sexually, It has no basis in Islam whatsoever, and it's actually counterintuitive to Islam, and it's very damaging. So Muslim men need to kind of get a grip on that. And actually, the scholarship, in your book, okay, there's one scholar I kind of Muhammad and Nafzawi. There's a whole section where he talks about sexually incompetent men under the undesirable characteristics of a man is a sexually incompetent male. Okay, so even the Islamic scholarship definitely discouraged being incompetent in the bedroom for the male. Pay amount of money that you make, notwithstanding. Okay, so now his whole idea that somehow it's okay for him to say, I don't do that. Nah, I don't do that. Okay. And so now I have a term. I'm going to call it the nah, I don't do that, brothers. Nah, I don't do that. Means that I don't want to do that. Now, that's fine. Okay. Intimacy is something that, people navigate together, and people have proclivities and aversions, and you work those things out with your partner. The disturbing thing that he says is that she should do it even if she doesn't want to. So on the one hand, he says, nah, I don't do it, but she should do it even because she doesn't want to, even if she doesn't want to, because I'm the king, because I provide financially. Okay. And that level of
Ignorance.
sexual, I'm sorry?
It's ignorance ultimately.
No, it's not only ignorance. It's not only ignorance. It is a level of subjugation, because I have the money and you are going to do what I tell you to do because I have the money. This is the reason why it's so disturbing. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, what's the big deal?" He said some really violent things in that little teeny tiny clip. And it sends a message to men, Muslim and non-Muslim men, and given the way that the society is, he should have been more responsible. And that is that if I have the money, I can force you to do whatever it is that you I want you to do. Now, it may not be physical, not all not power is not always inflicted on people physically. It could be emotional, it could be psychological. Just the idea that if a woman internalizes that, well, he makes the money, so yeah, I need to be doing this for him because he makes the money, because that's the reason he gave. Then but I don't deserve for it to be reciprocated on me if I want it. Okay, is just incredibly disturbing. And again, is anti-ethical with Islamic teachings. And just by virtue of the fact that someone who identifies as Muslim and has a large platform is spouting this stuff, it just reinforces the problems that already exist. Okay. So let's look at that whole idea of oral sex in the first place. So, what is the primary position? Because there's always going to be difference of opinion, but what is the primary position among the scholarship when it comes to oral sex, both cunnilingus and fellatio?
Okay, so cunnilingus, just for benefit of anyone listening who's not sure what, obviously, cunnilingus refers to oral stimulation of the female genitalia, and fellatio refers to oral stimulation of the male genitalia. Obviously, both of them are forms of oral sex, oral stimulation practices. Now, in terms of the Islamic position, there isn't any explicit.
Are you serious? Just when we started talking about it.
Quranic from.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you back up just a teeny tiny bit, because you stalled for a second.
Okay, so from cunnilingus, the definition of cunnilingus and fellatio.
No, from the Islamic. There's no specific. You said there's no specific.
There's no clear or explicit Quranic verse or hadith from the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, which explicitly prohibits oral sex. And the Islamic legal maxim is that unless something, when it comes to ma'lumat, which is things that are not related to worship, everything is halal unless there's something which explicitly prohibits it. So everything is halal unless you find a clear version of Quran or Hadith, or like the consensus of the scholars, which basically says that such a practice is haram, or to do something is haram. So because there isn't anything clearly which prohibits oral sex, both from the Quran or the Hadith, or from the consensus of the scholars, therefore that's why Muslims are of the opinion that it's permissible. There are some Muslim scholars, like for example the Hanafis, who have the opinion that oral sex is haram. And the reason why they say it's haram, or they say it's makruh, which is disliked, is because there's a hadith, but the hadith isn't sound, but I'm just going to explain their reasoning. There's a hadith when that Aisha is reported to have said that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, never looked at her genitalia out of shyness. So what they've taken from this hadith, but again, this hadith isn't sound, it's a weak hadith, but they've taken from this hadith to deduce that if the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, didn't look at Aisha's genitalia, of course, then by extension to even pleasure the genitalia with one's mouth, then it's haram. So that was their understanding. But again, that's not the majority of scholars, and even in that opinion, it's quite weak. But that's what some scholars have said, that's why it's haram, and some said it's makruh. Now you do find some scholars, even modern day scholars, who will say that although oral sex is not haram, it's disliked because it's the practice of the dogs, or it's the practice of people in the West, or it's the practice of people that have got no real haya, and what they've said is that the mouth is used to recite the Quran, to kiss your family, to kiss your children. Why would you use this apparatus to perform such a disgusting act? Again, I don't agree with that, but that's some of the views of some scholars, particularly of Asian origin and Arab origin. And when we're speaking about oral sex, and I think it's important that Muslims understand this, that sometimes when scholars are speaking, they're also speaking from their own cultural perspective or their practices. So they come from a background in which these practices is alien to them, and they might have heard that it's practiced in the West. Like there's some scholars who've said oral sex is just something which comes from the West, when in reality, and I've mentioned it in my book, there were a number of scholars from the 11th, 12th, 13th century who were speaking about oral sex and the pleasure that it gives both to the man and to the woman. So it isn't alien to Islam. But for whatever reason, in the last 100 years or so, there's a lot of Muslims, particularly from the Arab world and the Indian subcontinent, who look at oral sex as a despicable act. Although they say it's not haram, they say it's not becoming of a good or believing Muslim or a good believer. Third, people have researched this or Googled this on the internet. You do find those comments by a lot of scholars and originally from the Indian subcontinent. So I think and again, they're mainly speaking from a cultural perspective, that maybe it's something that they don't do, or it's not a practice that is agreeable in their culture. But to say that it's haram, like Islamically, obviously you need clear evidence, either from the Quran or the Hadith, and there isn't any verse in the Quran or Hadith which actually explicitly prohibits oral sex. So obviously, by virtue of that, then the practice is halal. But again, it doesn't mean that the people have to do it. If someone wants to do it, it's up to them. If they don't want to do it, again, it's up to them. They've got the volition to pick whichever practice they want to do, obviously in the bedroom. But for some reason, it's probably one of the most requested questions that I get asked on my Facebook page and the direct messages. Everyone wants to know, like, this practice, whether it's halal or haram. So again, it's important that we clarify from the Islamic perspective, there isn't anything which explicitly says it's haram. And if someone says it's haram, they need to bring evidence why it's haram. But then also the question is, there's some men who maybe want to perform this act or want to receive this act from their wife, but the wife, for whatever reason, doesn't feel comfortable giving it. Now, in those circumstances, again, it has to be that something that's a mutual understanding. So a man can't demand this because it's halal and say you have to do this. And that's why, again, DJ Khaled's comments was very problematic, because it came across, and I'm giving the benefit of the doubt, and I don't think he meant it, but I think the way he said it was as if she has to give. I'm trying to give him benefit of the doubt, please. He came across as if it was a demand, when I think for him it was more of expectation, in a sense of, because
I'm sorry, I'm not giving it the benefit of the doubt. I would have if he had said, well, you still have to do it anyway. There's things that you have to do. Okay. You may not like it, but there are things that you have to do.
Yeah, I know, but again, it's a lot of bravado that men utter, particularly when they're in public platforms. So that's why I think when I watched it, even when I spoke to another of my friends, what they deduced from what he said wasn't a demand. it was just like an expectation. So although it did
Okay.
come from very
I'm sorry, but I we're gonna have to kind of like
agree to,
center the woman here, because his messaging was definitely directed towards women. That's why he was even looking at a woman when he said that mess. Okay. And so it was definitely a matter of him asserting that I am the provider, I am the king, and you may not like this, but you're supposed to do it. Because the woman asked him, so if she says no, then that's good. He said, no, that's not good. All right. So he definitely meant you have to do it if you don't like it.
But to be fair to me, again, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. The clip that I played was obviously 1 minute 33 seconds. The actual interview itself is about 15 minutes. And even when they asked him, because he went on the program, I think 2014 or 2015, to promote like his songs or his albums and his headphones, they were asking him this question. And if you watch the interview, he felt uncomfortable. He didn't want to respond with his question about his private life. And then he was going on about, he puts in the work. And then when they
say no. Say no.
I agree, but again, bravado. I'm just trying to.
But this is the problem. This is the problem here. Okay. If you don't say no, and you say something that can be, in this day and age, that can be trimmed down into something that can cause a lot of damage to society, to social interactions, then you need to take responsibility for that. That's why I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt, because when you sit back and you say something like that in this toxic male environment, especially hip hop is one of the worst, one of the most toxic environments, period. Okay. But in American society and globally, women across the globe have to deal with masculine toxicity. And the idea that we are expected to spend a lot of time and energy in gratifying men, even if we don't want to. Okay. So he reinforced that messaging. So instead of shutting up, he actually committed an act of symbolic violence. That's why I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt any more than I would give Kanye the benefit of the doubt of saying that slavery was a choice. You're talking about some very specific messaging that's sent to a population of people that have to deal with different forms of oppression, and sex historically all the way up to modern day has been used as a tool of gender subjugation. And so for him to say that and to reinforce that, I'm not giving him the benefit of the doubt at all. Just not doing it.
No, fair point. And I think that's why what DJ Khaled said is a team, but not only to Muslim men, but to men in general. And obviously, like what you said, we have to be careful what we said. And I'm glad that even you've not only unpacking what he said, but explaining it in a way where obviously, even as a man, I might have listened to what he said and not really seen how problematic it was. But obviously, the way you've explained it, I've definitely found it very beneficial, and hopefully other people. So I think that's why it's important that we have women as well checking us, because like I said, I understood what he said. Again, it was problematic, but I didn't take as much offense as maybe a woman did, because obviously I'm a man. Do you understand? I'm getting it. That's why it's important.
Because it's not going to affect you the same way.
Exactly.
And it probably won't affect his wife the same way, because no one's saying that he may be a very loving and caring husband, and he may be a considerate lover. No one cares about that, because it's the words that he said and the fact that they've been conveyed and brought up again. You would think it would die a quiet death, but now here it is again, and it's affecting the listeners. And the listeners are turning around, and it's affecting other people. So that's the reason why it's like it is really, really so important. Yeah, you can have a slip of the tongue and everything like that. Double back and say, I was a jackass and I shouldn't have said that stuff. Should have been talking about my sex life in the first place, But because I did, and I said that really horrible thing that I did, I'm sorry,
But honestly, that's why it's good you're saying what you're saying, because again, you're unpacking what he said and you're explaining why it's so problematic. And again, that's why I think it's beneficial, because otherwise, I don't think enough men would have been able to do justice in terms of being able to explain why what he said was so wrong, the way you're doing, to be honest with you, or like another woman. So
Well, see, that's why, and that's so funny because I had just with your book, I had just kind of like picked up sexual ethics in Islam by Keisha Ali, and that was one of the things that she was saying. Like, yeah, Muslim scholarship is very much male centered, and so it becomes very very difficult when it comes to everything across the board, and especially issues like this. That because it's so male centered, there's so much gatekeeping that the perspectives of women is shut down a lot of times. And so even if it's like a teeny tiny way, I'm going to try my best to at least assert, how it is that stuff like this
That's why
continues
you
to be
put
a
your
problem.
book to paper and start publishing books. Honestly, seriously. And
I only do fiction. I only
no,
do fiction. But I
no, but
want to get back.
going to non, even if you're gonna, no, seriously, I think it's important because what you're saying is true, and it's similar to what Hisha Ali said. But then that's why it's important for more Muslim women to put pen to paper. And I know everyone loves fiction, but also I know non-fiction can be quite dry and dull. But it's important that we hear the woman's perspective, because otherwise you're just going to be hearing the male perspective of people like myself, which again, we need both sides of the coin. So again, we need more women, more Muslim women in particular, to be writing about these sensitive topics.
Well, I want to get back just for a second to the whole oral sex thing, just for a second to because you said something really really interesting about when certain scholars, even modern scholars, that kind of like express an aversion to it, how they may not come out and say it's completely haram, which that doesn't mean that people won't interpret it that way, but they will attach a hyper piety to it.
Right.
Okay, and so I was just looking in the notes and this is from Muhammad al-Jabali in his book Closer Than a Garment, which I got up here somewhere. Oral sex was not one of the known practices of the early righteous Muslims. In addition, it is known to be the practice of dogs and the disbelievers. Okay, so in that sense, without specifically saying it's haram, you can assert a level of disgust and aversion to it that, first of all, it was not the act of the righteous Muslim, which in turn says, well, if you do it, you're not righteous. Okay.
Right.
And first of all, how do you know? Okay. Out of all the righteous Muslims, none of them were practicing oral sex. Okay. I mean, he was kind of like, it was not known. It was not known. Doesn't mean it didn't happen, but it was not known. But he just kind of says, if you do this, you're not righteous. You're like a dog and you're like a disbeliever. So when you read stuff like that, okay, and so now we're pivoting away from Khaled, okay, because he was a mess and we know it. When you read stuff like that, it definitely will affect your um, sensibilities and whether or not this is something that you want to do. And so that's something that I hear a lot. I'm sure you probably hear a lot. And is that, this is haram. You hear it's haram. So even though these scholars are very careful about not saying it is, because, there's a whole bunch of ramifications with saying something is haram when it's not, they still are very, very adept at sending the message that this is not something that good Muslims do. Okay. Despite other scholarship that kind of says this is something that you definitely can do. And it's a part of gratifying your partner. So how do Muslims kind of grapple with that? Your partner has been sent this message from the Jabalis of the Muslim scholarship. They haven't been listening to Walid Bassiouni, which people need to kind of check out what he says. I remember I sat in one of his Al Maghrib seminars. Yeah, you need to take one of those seminars because he was very, very specific and is very, very direct about answering certain questions. And basically, it's like if it's not something that, like you said, is framed as haram, especially in the bedroom, then it's like it's all halal. There's certain things that you can't do. There's very specific things that you can't do, and we know about those things. And then everything kind of outside of that is fair game. But now you have this scholarship that's kind of going into your bedroom and deciding that this is something that you shouldn't do, and they're exploiting your desire to be a good Muslim to do so.
I think again the best way to combat ignorance or misinformation is by knowledge and sound knowledge. So, and obviously, and that's through education. Now, as much as I do understand what you're saying, because a lot of people are receiving this misinformation or people's opinions, I'll just say it's people's opinions. If they were to arm themselves with, like what you said, with Sheikh Walid Basuni and other books, and I'm not going to just plug mine, but not necessarily mine, but books that speak about what other Muslim scholars have said about oral sex, then they wouldn't be as troubled, because they'll be like, that's that person's opinion. So when I'm listening to some scholars and they're speaking about certain things that you shouldn't do, not saying it's haram, a lot of times they're speaking from the experience. That was that. Maybe for them it's an alien custom. It's something that they would never do because of the society that they were brought up in, or the culture that they were brought up in. So for them, it's something that only non-Muslims do, or it's only something that, you know, disbelievers or people that love pornography. So again, I'm able to, again, if you arm yourself with knowledge and correct education, you wouldn't be as bothered by this misinformation and these ignorant comments. Because I don't think a number of these scholars and you know, Muslim da'is and writers are speaking from a place of malice. They honestly believe that this is despicable practice. The same way there's some customs in terms of how a man speaks to a woman. In some cultures, you know, there's certain customs that you don't do. It's not an agreeable practice, but you go to another culture, it's fine. Do you understand what I'm getting at? And I'll give a quick examples. If you read Ibn Battuta's book, where he talks about, obviously, when he travels around the world, and when he went to Sudan, he speaks about a number of the practice of the women that are like, he didn't say it's haram, but he said this, he was shocked that the way the women were interacting with the men, the way the men were interacting with women, and that when men had female friends, but they were deplorable. And even when he spoke to a lot of the scholars and sheikhs at the time who had female friends, and he was asking, how can you behave in such a way when you know this type of practice is, you know, it's not from the religion? And then the African scholar at the time said to him, number one, the way the women aren't like the women here aren't like the women in where you're from, and this is an agreeable practice. We're not doing anything that's illegitimate. If I'm just speaking to her, it's not going to raise suspicion like it might raise suspicion in your country. So again, this is an example of a practice which, in maybe where he was from in Northern Africa or in Arabia's peninsula, because of their culture, strict segregation. I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. So if a man was with a woman in any capacity, it will raise suspicion. Whereas if you go to some other societies like West Africa, it wouldn't raise the same amount of suspicion as it would in other countries. So if you've got a scholar speaking about some practices of Muslims, for example, in the West or West Africa, he might look at these practices as people being very loose, and he might say these are not practices what a religious person would do, because from where he's from, religious people behave a certain way. Do you understand what I'm getting at? So that's why I think it's important. That's why I said important, even when we're talking about sexual practices, a lot of people that are writing these books or giving these lectures is of, if I'm being honest, they're wrapped up in cotton wool, and not a lot of them are aware of what really goes on. And maybe if in their, you know, their private life, they're happy to do missionary and that's it. There's some people that are a bit more adventurous, and it even happened during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when Umar bin Khattab, we know he was from Mecca, when he married a woman from Medina after they made the hijrah, or the migration, and he married a woman from Medina, and he wanted to penetrate her from behind, not in the anus, but in the vagina.
Yeah.
Was a doggy style. And the woman was like, because she's not used to it.
Crazy.
But no, it's important because these things happened during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where they questioned sexual practices. Is this allowed? Is this un-Islamic? Now, because culturally, entering from the rear was abhorrent. So culturally, she wouldn't allow him to do that. So then he went to the Prophet. Umar went to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and relayed what had occurred and said, "Is this a deplorable practice?" And then the Prophet said, "No, it's fine as long as you don't enter in the anus." So this is an example of a woman who, and imagine those men, they probably wouldn't have, you know, done those positions as well, because from where they were, what the Jews said in Medina at that time is, anyone who enters a woman from behind, they will be disfigured. That I'll be disfigured. So again, they were brought up in a culture where you only do certain sex positions are allowed. And again, there's no shame when it comes to the deen in terms of when we're speaking about the truth. And again, if these were conversations that occurred during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, number one, we shouldn't be surprised that we're having similar discussions in terms of what is allowed, what is not allowed, what's an agreeable practice, what's not an agreeable practice, and the differences even amongst Muslims, because these were Muslims in, okay, it wasn't the country, but the same area, but there's two different cultures in Medina and Mecca. Now, of course, if you've got Muslims from Arabia, Muslims from the Indian subcontinent, Muslims from West Africa, Muslims from America, of course, they're even going to have even more differences in terms of what is an agreeable practice. So that's why, if anything, we should have more of these discussions, because you know that there's going to be different understandings in terms of what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. So that's why for me, I'm really surprised why a lot of Muslims are, quite prudish and shy to have these conversations. When we've got precedent in it in the time of not only the Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him, but also a number of Muslim scholars who wrote, which you're very well aware of, a number of books speaking about sexual practices, what is not only what is allowed, but what is better than another. So again, I think it's important that we have these type of conversations
Well,
and open.
I think that the prudishness and that we experience is very much based in a type of patriarchy, and that is the use of sex as a means of control from by one gender over another gender. And so when you have a limitation of knowledge, when you restrict knowledge to something very, very specific, and to what it is that is needed to maintain a certain level of control, that's where you keep it, and that's where societies tend to keep it. And unfortunately, Muslim cultures globally are very, very uh, uh, oppositional, kind of like a Western patriarchy. I don't like using the term patriarchy, because Islam is patriarchal. The prophecy is patriarchal. You know, but for lack of of a better term, now just kind of like this kind of oppressive patriarchy that's taking place. And so it has to extend through a society in every echelon of the society. And when you're talking about gender, it definitely has to extend into the bedroom. And so that's the reason why a lot of times, if you have a person, a partner who is a male, and sent to the message that if he's the male that's the provider in that partnership, then he has certain privileges over his partner, period, across the board. And it extends into the bedroom, hence the reason why I can have you're going to perform oral sex on me, I'm not going to perform oral sex on you, which is kind of makes me kind of wonder, because with these Muslim men that are saying this, turn around and say, well, you know what, Ali should have done it to Fatima, because at a time in their marriage, she was the breadwinner. Okay. And she was the one that was carrying the wood and working and earning the money and stuff like that. So then does that now switch? Is he no longer the head of the family? Is he no, so if you're putting your leadership, if you're making it about economics alone, that in and of itself is the problem, because economic shift and change in a lot of relationships, okay, what if you get injured? Okay. What if you're a male and you get injured? Okay. What happens then? So now you can do it and she doesn't have to do it, type of thing. It's like ridiculous. That's the because it's about the control of one gender over another, and doing it at a very, very intimate level. And unfortunately, because the scholarship is so androcentric, so centered on men and masculinity and malehood and everything like that, it consequently is always disadvantaging Muslim women. It disadvantages us spiritually, because a lot of the spirituality is through this phallic channel, okay, which can be problematic. It definitely can disadvantage us sensually if we're constantly sent the message that we are supposed to satisfy our husbands and not vice versa. They're given an excuse constantly, time and time again. And the Prophet ﷺ didn't even give the men those excuses. A woman came to the Prophet and said, basically her husband was intimate. So he had to investigate it, because it's like, if you're not doing that, okay, she needs to kind of reconsider whether or not, if she may want to not be with you anymore. So it's like,
Quite
it's
interesting
definitely,
that we didn't hear about that hadith.
huh?
You find it
What?
interesting that
It
not
was.
many scholars kind of speak about that hadith. They kind of skip over, or they don't really.
Oh, about her complaining about going to the prophet and saying that her husband's intimate and
Yeah,
showing the fringe.
yeah. And
Yeah, they gotta skip that hadith.
the different interpretations that maybe he was small manhood or he wasn't able to satisfy her. They don't speak about that because again, like you said, and I liked the phrase you used, oppressive patriarchy, because I think using it, obviously we know, as you said, it's prophecy is patriarchal. So, and even Islam encourages patriarchy because obviously the man is supposed to be the head of the family. But I think where people have a problem is oppressive patriarchy. And I think if we're just going to use the word patriarchy, I think a lot of Muslims, particularly men, are going to feel a type of way to embrace it as if we should fight against patriarchy, because it's as if you're fighting something which is ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it's oppressive patriarchy, which is a problem. Where men who are in positions of power are abusing that power to oppress is a form of oppression, is a form of transgression, which we know is against Islam. So I think when maybe a piece of advice when we're speaking about patriarchy, it's really, like you said, oppressive patriarchy, and I think that's something that even men can understand. That's a problem. But this patriarchy in and of itself, I think a lot of men will find that quite difficult to kind of embrace in terms of we need to dismantle patriarchy, because are you telling me that I shouldn't be the breadwinner? Are you telling me that I shouldn't be the provider of my family, when not only culturally but also religiously my understanding that that's my duty? It doesn't mean that I oppress. Did you understand? So I think of the
No,
word,
I
the
totally
phrase
agree.
oppress,
But
that's what I think a lot of men would jump on the oppressive wagon in terms of dismantling that. No, in terms of dismantling that.
yeah.
But if you just said dismantling patriarchy or patriarchy is a problem, then I would, not only myself, I think a lot of men will question then what should we replace it with?
Yeah. Well, I think that that's the reason why I kind of like I try to. You get caught up in the jargon, and right now, like there's a Western conceptualization of patriarchy that's taking the word over, and so there is no nuance to it. So when you say patriarchy, it means one specific thing in a Western context, and when you're in a Western culture, and so as a Muslim, we know that our deen is something that there is a level of patriarchy in the deen itself, and so it's not something that's always consistently negative, and so we have to kind of like constantly make that differentiation. And the problem with and there is a differentiation because in an Islamic context of patriarchy, okay, and male leadership, there's an increased responsibility, and that responsibility includes sexual gratification. And so because there are groups of Muslim men, okay, that kind of downplay that or ignore that, it just really shows that they've embraced more of a kind of oppressive Western concept of patriarchy than the prophetic guidance when it comes to being leaders. Because you can't possibly think that leaders provide for the people that they lead. Leaders look after the people that they lead. Leaders support the people that they lead. And this whole idea that you don't have to do that for someone that you're sharing the most intimate parts of your life with just shows how detached you've become to the prophetic guidance. Okay. And which is tragic. I was talking to someone, very, very knowledgeable person that I have a great amount of respect for. And they said that there should be optimally, and this is a man that said this, okay? He said, optimally, when it comes to having sex with your wife, a Muslim man having sex with his wife, or a man having sex with his wife, the power comes from your ability as a man to bring your wife to ecstasy. That's where your power comes from. That's where you should feel powerful and masculine and like that. Okay. He said, unfortunately, for a lot of men, they have been trained that the power is in their own sexual gratification and not in their ability to bring their wife to ecstasy. It's selfish, it's self centered, and it's dysfunctional. Okay. And so a lot of times that's exactly what it leads to. It leads to a certain level of sexual dysfunction because it can affect you emotionally as well and psychologically as well to not have that gratification. And it's mentioned in the books. The scholars mention it in the book. Okay, when you don't have that sexual gratification, how detrimental it can be. Okay, so we are having a problem with a lot of sexual dysfunction and intimate relationships in Muslim families, uh, in society, which is tragic because when you have that dysfunction, it can always extend into other things. Okay. Other forms of dysfunction, other forms of abuse. It can actually be abusive to deny your partner gratification because you simply don't want to learn how to be a competent and giving partner is abusive. It's abusive because I'll talk from as myself as a Muslim woman. Okay, in many ways I'm stuck. Okay, I can be stuck because I'm married to someone. If I want to maintain a good relationship with my Lord and Creator, that is the person that I go to satisfy myself carnally. What happens if that person just does not want to do it? They don't have the knowledge to do it. They don't want to acquire the knowledge to do it. And they still make demands on me, but they're just not going to do it. Where do I go for gratification? I can't go anywhere. I'm trapped in this dysfunctional relationship where my needs are not met. And that's what you do if you do not learn how to gratify your partner. You trap them, okay, in this relationship, especially a Muslim woman. Especially a Muslim woman. I mean, Muslim men across the board are they've become very, very adept at restricting Muslim women and becoming complacent in it. Did I lose you? And becoming complacent in it. Meaning that, okay, well, we could always get a Muslim woman because they can't marry non-Muslim men, right? So we can feel comfortable in that. Like these sisters are ours, they're not going anywhere. All right. We get a wife, okay? And if a man is not satisfied with his wife, okay, first of all, the culture very much teaches him get rid of her behind point blank. All right. But if not, oh, get a second and a third. You can have fun with the other ones, okay? Type of thing. And she can't go anywhere. I can be incompetent and she can't go anywhere at all. She's trapped. Okay. And if you do that and you're knowingly doing that, you're being sexually oppressive and you're being sexually abusive to your partner. And that is not something that was taught by the Prophet of Islam. That is Allah says in the Quran that we get comfort from each other. And if I cannot get sexual gratification, how am I comfortable?
No, very well said. I think it's important, like that we as men listen to like what you said, because again, I think what you said was very well said. I can't really add anything more to it, but I just think as men, we need to listen to our partners. And I mean, how you articulate yourself was brilliant. Again, I just hope that men take heed and again try and change the culture in which, like I think the person that you spoke to said that in terms of trying to seek gratification from, or thinking the most important type of gratification is male gratification, you should take pride in pleasuring your spouse. And I think if people have got that mentality, they wouldn't not only utter the things that Khalid said, but they wouldn't also believe such ignorant comments and despicable comments, because again, it's this idea that as long as my sexual needs are fulfilled, that's the most important thing, and that's to be on the end of. So that's why I think, to me, when I listened to it, it was more of a cultural issue what he was saying, because I know it was a cultural hang-up, because it was quite interesting that there were a number of even celebrities, African American celebrities, men, who was saying what was he talking about? Like T.I. said something, The Rock.
He was like, what? They were like, what? Are you kidding me? No, but no, it's definitely there. Did I lose you? I think I lost him.
No, you take. Can you hear me?
Okay, you got to
Hello.
start over because now I can hear you. Now I can hear you.
Okay, so I was saying that. Okay, great. I was saying that some men take pleasure in pleasuring their woman, and there's some men who couldn't care less. And I would argue that DJ Khaled sounds like he's the latter. Now, for the men that take helping their partner achieve climax is more important than they themselves achieving climax. I think that mentality not a lot of men have. But again, it depends on the culture they've been brought up in, because to not be able to bring your partner to climax, a lot of men will ridicule such a person. Like there's some communities in Sudan, in Mauritania, in Western Africa, and Rwanda, which my book is going to be about.
Oh man!
In which the men they can't bring their woman to climax. So it's a total different mindset in which you're brought up in. Because if you're brought up in an environment where it's expected of you, a lot of women not being gratified, the men will be suffering from performance anxiety because they'll be trying to because again, it's not that easy as well, to be fair. But again, at least I'll put the pressure on the men that this is what you need to do. Yeah. But again, not every man will be able to bring every woman to climax. So there will be situations where they might need to part ways, and that was what happened during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, because she did part ways, and that's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, especially in a number of traditional Muslim cultures, once a woman gets married, it's difficult for her to divorce her husband, especially if the reasons are he didn't perform in the bedroom. Can you imagine someone saying that this day and age? A lot of even the Muslim imams,
I think there's definitely some cultural specifications for that. I think here in the United States, especially among African Americans, that sister will drop him like
which is good.
He got to go.
Which is,
and word will get around. Honestly, I know men talk, but women talk too, and it's just like word will get around. Now that brother, he don't got a game.
which is good. And again, speaking from a Black British context as well, it's similar as well that you're under pressure because you need to put in the work. Whereas in other communities, it's not necessarily the same. You need to.
But I think the pressure. But see, this is the thing. I think that one of the biggest problems that is occurring and that we're seeing, okay, is that this pressure, women feel it too. Women have that pressure too. But I think that there's more energy, there's more time and energy in a woman's life that she has got to learn, at least have an inclination to learn how to satisfy her partner, because that's the thing that you're taught from the time that you're very, very young, is that ultimately you want to satisfy your partner. The problem that happens is that that's not the messaging that men get. The men are not getting the messaging across the board, especially Muslim men, which I think is tragic. I really, really think it's tragic that you need to kind of take the time and energy to sexually gratify your partner, because there is absolutely an intrinsic link between your faith and your sensual interaction. You make dua before you even make love. So how is it that the Prophet said that we should be people of excellence? How is it that we're falling short in this? And again, I have to say it's because men are not a lot of times not sent the messaging. Women are in certain cultures are stunted and not sent the messaging. And then you jam these people together and don't expect dysfunction. If someone is feeling inadequate, okay, that can present in many ways. And unfortunately, in a lot of Muslim marriages, it presents as violence as well. So it's just like we're not teaching Muslims how to be competent lovers. We're not teaching Muslims how to be intuitive and talk to your partner and listen to your partner. We're not teaching those things. It's not something that is happening. I mean, even okay, so they have Ramadan prep, right? And I always go through the list of everything that when they have all these different organizations have Ramadan prep. Not one, not one organization addressed intimacy during Ramadan, during those long hours and early suhoor and everything like that. Not one of them addressed that. No, and you know how important intimacy can be. Why aren't you addressing that? Okay. That's the issue. We're not talking. And men are getting it even less than women are getting it, I think. And on top of it, they're getting the message, just satisfy yourself, just satisfy yourself. That's how you're a man. Just satisfy. That's what she's supposed to do. She's supposed to satisfy you. You don't have to satisfy her, which is tragic because it just creates like these horrible situations and it affects you and it affects your dean. So I just think it's just like people need to talk more and learn more. And
Yeah,
and when the Jabalis of the world write their books and disseminate that nonsense, okay, their intentions notwithstanding, okay, because I think that one of the things that I may seem very, very harsh, but that's because I hear the bad side of when men read this stuff and go and I can have you whenever I want you. And are you denying me my rights? And no, you get on your knees. I'm not getting on my knees. You get on your knees. Okay. And how demoralizing and degrading that is. So no, okay, I'm sorry. You can be diplomatic if you want. I'm not being diplomatic about this because women are hurting and women are suffering, okay, because their men are incompetent in the bedroom and there's very little scholarship out there that's trying to mitigate that nonsense. And then they wonder why it's like all of these problems. Why is it that women want to leave their husbands? Yeah, I want to leave you. You left me hanging. So why should I want to be with you? Why in the world should I want to be with you? And it's this delusion. I can't believe Muslim men are still deluded at this level. I really, really can't believe that Muslim men are still deluded at this level. You really think that Muslim women in this day and age who are becoming more and more proficient in society, we're educated, we're making our own money, we're making our own way. Okay. You really think that you could just bring a B game and it will be satisfied? It's ridiculous. I can't believe they're still deluded.
but to be honest with you, they shouldn't. You should listen to what you said prior to when you said that you're surprised Muslim men are deluded. You yourself said that there's a lack of education, and men are being misinformed. So if that's the case, you shouldn't be surprised that men are deluded. And and to be fair, yes, it's not right. It's not considerate that Muslim men are thinking it's okay for me to just bring my B game and she's going to bring A+ game. But unfortunately, there are a lot of men who are getting away with it. No, seriously, there are a lot of men who get
But she's trapped. She's stuck.
I know, but a lot of men unfortunately are inconsiderate. So that's why I think it's about changing the mentality. So if men have more of the mentality, the mindset of they seek pleasure in pleasuring a woman, then they would try their best to please her, to have honest and open conversations and discussions and find out what are her needs and then try to meet those needs. But if the man's got the mentality where he's selfish and he's a selfish lover and he's very incompetent and he's satisfied with that, if he's relatively wealthy, he still can find a lot of women. Maybe they might not be happy that will stay with him because of what he's bringing to the table in terms of finances. So that's why it's all well and good saying a woman wouldn't like that, but he can easily get another woman that will stay with him. Do you understand? So he will continue to live in delusion. And there are a lot of men who
I
live
get
like
your point.
So that's why. But I think it's changing mentality. So if again, just going back to DJ Khaled, I can imagine he grew up in an environment in which oral sex was seen as something that a man doesn't do. Similarly, if he was brought up in an environment, not only him, but other men who are brought up in an environment in which not being able to pleasure your wife is seen as something that is shameful as a man, and you take pride in the way he brags about making so much money, being successful, and providing for financially. If
he said, "I put the work." You're not putting in all the work.
That's why I said it's ignorance. That's why I said it's ignorance, because even in terms of understanding biology and female sexuality, we know that only 70% of only 30% of women reach climax via penetrative intercourse. So even understanding that, you know that there's more other ways that you need in order to bring her to climax. So if you're just thinking you're putting in the work, when the average man, it might be 5 to 7 minutes, if we're honest, or maybe 15 minutes, and you think that's enough, when a lot of women need on average 20 minutes of clitoral stimulation to climax, then you realize that that work that you're putting in is probably not enough. Did you understand what I'm getting at? But as men, we're just thinking about ourselves. But if he, like I said, if he was of a mindset that the way he seeks, he's proud of how he can make a lot of money. If he was proud in the way he can pleasure his wife, I don't think he would have uttered those comments. So that's why, again, I think it's about the mindset has to change it. You do find it amongst some men, and then but amongst other men who may about rare physical life, but also emotionally and other aspects. So again, it just comes down to education. But this is a discussion that needs to be had, especially amongst men, because we don't really have those type of conversations unless you're fortunate enough to be in an environment in which it's encouraged. Like I mentioned, societies in like Rwanda and parts of Mauritania, and even I'm sure parts of America, where men are take pride in pleasuring their spouse. And if that's the case, then they wouldn't have those issues, which, you know, like what DJ Khaled expressed.
Yeah. Well, some people said that he was lying.
No, I'm not going to get into that. But again, I mean, I don't know. He might have just not done a very good job. That's why. But either way, what he said was what he said. And there are a lot of men who say that, to be honest. Whether they're lying or not, that's another.
Because it's a matter of, I can't admit that I do this because it somehow affects my masculinity.
Exactly. Because that's how some men view it. And also, because when you're looking at oral stimulation, it's you could argue it's the ultimate form of pleasure, in the sense that you're primarily focused on pleasuring your partner. So as a man, if you're a man, that you're a selfish lover, you're thinking about yourself. Why am I going to try and pleasure her when it's all about me? If I'm thinking about myself, that's why for a man to receive fellatio is for some men is better than for him to actually penetrate a woman, because he doesn't want her to be satisfied. He just wants her to satisfy him. Do you understand what I mean? So that's why it's about the mindset and the mentality. And again, I think unfortunately a lot of men just do have this problematic mindset that it's all about them, and male gratification and male pleasure is more important than female. If they were to take the time to educate these conversations with their partner as well, they'll realize there's other ways that they can, you know, stimulate her both not only physically but mentally and emotionally. So it just comes down to a lack of education, ultimately ignorance for me. Do I see it?
And a lack of conversation is very important.
Lack of conversation.
And just even between partners, because everything is not for everyone, and you have to kind of always consistently talk to your partner.
Can I say one thing
about it?
Can I say one thing? I just came to
said always consistently talk to your partner. And
but
it's something that'll always, it's a conversation that needs to go on and on and on and on.
But one of the problems, there's a disparity. Even give an example. A couple of, I think I've mentioned this to you before, but I think it was the last year, I posted something on my A Taste of Honey Facebook page, speaking about this, and this is, you know, this is, you should be speaking about intimate stuff, this is haram, this and the other. And then a woman posted under and said, yeah, I really like this page, keep posting what you're doing, it's very informative. Then the same man posted after, about 20 minutes later, husband of the woman that posted, and said, why are you reading this page? I told you shouldn't be reading this page, this and the other. So you can see even within a household, there isn't even that discussion. People, honestly, some people have used even my book or other books similar to mine to use it as to bring up discussion, because they're not comfortable to have that discussion with their partner. Especially some men have this, you know, they feel a type of way. So a lot of women hold back, because if they were to open up, you know, have these conversations, start these conversations, some men might be thinking, what have you been listening to? What have you been reading? Have you been sleeping with someone else? And this is a problem. And a lot of it's the male ego. So that's why I think men need to understand that it's healthy to have these discussions. And if a woman's speaking to you about this, she wants you to pleasure her, it doesn't mean that, well, it might mean that you're incompetent. So you need to fix your game. You need to
No,
take pride.
homeboy should have woken up if his wife is on it.
But it's a very difficult conversation. I imagine that could be to have after. Imagine after 5 years of marriage, or even 7 years, and there are a lot of women, unfortunately, who've
But
never.
see, that's the problem. It's not. It shouldn't be after 5 years. It should be after 7 years. It should be on that first night. And we're not taught that. We're not taught before. We hear all of this stuff about marriage, 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 marriage. And I have yet. Okay, I've been Muslim for decades now. I have yet to really hear. I heard one person actually, Waleed Basuni in his class, which is not enough.
Hmm.
One person that said from day one, you should be having those conversations. After your first intimate encounter with your partner, you need to talk to your partner about that encounter, what you liked, what you didn't like, what they didn't like, what you feel comfortable with. You know, it's like people don't have these conversations. And sex changes over years. You know, you're doing this with your partner, someone that you love. It doesn't mean it stays the exact same way all of the time. That's why you should always be having those conversations. So if it's like 5 years, how do you not talk about something
But
that you're doing for 5 years and how many ever kids? But it's just like we don't have
we,
those conversations, and it should be
but
doing
we
it
also
from the first night.
but
First
we also
night,
have to remember.
Muslim men from the first night, okay, right afterwards, turn and say, "Did you like that? Uh, is there something that you didn't like? This is what I liked. This is what I didn't like. Is there something I could do better?" Okay. And if she's comfortable enough to say it, then do it. And then stop. It's like stop being incompetent. Stop being afraid to talk about it. You've seen each other naked. How can you not talk to each other if you've seen each other naked? Sorry.
And how do you even so the man's asking those questions, but she feels uncomfortable to answer because whether you call it like hyper or excessive piety, she believes she
No.
shouldn't be engaged in that
Yeah.
conversation. You do have that, or there's some women who've realized on their life that they can't. Women aren't even aware of their own body, their own sexuality. So in that type of situation where a man is asking questions and she's not even sure how she's supposed to, because he hasn't brought her to climax, so she doesn't even know what her body's capable of. So in that situation, what advice would you give to a woman who has realized after, later on in life, after 5 years, 10 years of marriage, that there's let's not worry how she found out, but she found out maybe through self-exploration, but she found out that there's certain things that she can do or her body can. How would she have that conversation now with a man who is stuck in these ways, very ignorant, and again previously they've never really had that conversation before?
Well, I have to say honestly, if your partner has had to resort to any kind of self gratification, that's the death knell to your relationship. If because and I'm saying in a Muslim context, only if you're talking about partners who see masturbation as something that you do not do. Okay, so I'm talking about in an Islamic context where masturbation is something that you do not do. So you're talking about someone that has been brought by you to the level of desperation that they're going to engage in an act that they know that they really shouldn't be doing, but that's all that they have left. So your relationship is in a whole lot of trouble, and you need to get a grip and get it right, because that is not a good position to put your partner in at all. Either or. If you're a woman and you're holding out, or and your husband has been brought to that level, you're in trouble. Your relationship is in trouble. If you're a man and your wife has been brought to that level, your relationship is in trouble. That means that they can't find any gratification from you, and they're ending up doing something that they know is disliked Islamically. Okay, because that's the only thing that's what you've brought them to. Because remember, you have a responsibility to satisfy your partner. Okay, mutual sexual gratification. There should be that expectation. But now if she finds out, okay, that's one thing. That's a whole nother thing. So let's say homeboy wants to get it right, okay? And now he has someone, his partner has gotten to the point where she's learned to satisfy herself so she knows what she likes and what she doesn't like. He better listen. He better listen and she better talk. And she better talk. It's like there is no shyness between couples. There's no shyness between couples. It's like you have to be frank and you have to be honest because at the end of the day, this is something you're both doing feasibility. All right. It's a way of satisfying yourself in a way that's pleasing to your Lord so that you can maintain a positive relationship with your Lord and a spiritual connection with your Lord. So there's no room to be like, oh, I can't tell him. No, tell him because if you don't tell him, he's not gonna know. Okay. When you did that, I listened to that podcast that you did, the Mandingo Way. And at the end, I first of all, you guys, I mean, I was like, are these 50-year-old boys? But okay. I was
It was
like,
a couple of years
this is not the Habib Akande that I know.
that was a couple of years ago, so you can see the growth. Hopefully, you
So
can see the.
you've grown since then. But if the man said at the end, I don't think it was you. I think it was someone else. The like if she's making a lot of noise, then it's all good.
Oh yeah, that was one of my. Yeah, that wasn't me.
And I just was like, someone needs to talk to this brother. Okay, they will not know. You cannot blame your husband for being sexually incompetent if you're not willing to talk to him about it.
Right.
Okay, you can't blame him if he does. You can blame him if he doesn't want to listen.
But
Okay,
say,
that's a whole nother.
just going back to my friend that made that comment, he meant if you're attentive to her needs and you're listening to what she's saying. Of course, we know some women can fake noises and things like that, but that he was giving an example. That's so I'm trying to give him benefit of that as well.
You try to you people are caping. Stop caping for these brothers.
No, but he said if you're attentive and you're
But
listening.
it was so sexually immature. Let's just be honest. If she's making a lot of noise, it's all good. Give me a break. But no, you need to learn how to talk to your spouse. That's what you need to learn how to do. And the fact that you're uncomfortable with it means that there is an issue because you should be comfortable with it. You should be comfortable with saying whatever it is you need to say. You should be comfortable with hearing whatever it is that your partner has to tell you, okay? Even if it's something that where your partner may have something that you're not particularly comfortable with. You need to discuss that because I can tell you one thing, all right? Outside of what's haram, which we know is very specific and limited, okay? Your partner comes to you and they have the courage to tell you something that you may not be particularly comfortable with. If you don't navigate through that with them and shut them down, okay, they're going to resent you. They're going to resent you, okay? So it's better to have these conversations and learn how to be comfortable with each other and learn, sometimes there is a nah, I don't do that. Okay.
When do you think that people should have these conversations, like instead of discussing sexuality? Because that's another question that I do get as well. Like with Muslims, when would you encourage it? Would you say straight after marriage, before marriage? Because I would argue that waiting until just before someone gets married, by that time it's too late for a lot of people because people's mentality has been shaped in terms of what their expectations are, their understandings of sex. Unfortunately, for a lot of people, it's been shaped by pornography or some warped understanding of what a relationship is.
Yeah.
But when would you I would say obviously it's age appropriate, but as young as
Yeah.
possible, we've had these kind of discussions. But
Well, I think that parents need to be having conversations with their children. And I have frank conversations with my children to the point where sometimes they don't want to ask me because they're going to get the answer. So, parents need to be having conversations with their children. I'm starting to think from just some of the observations that I made, and you're talking about Muslims, especially, I'm thinking like in terms of the United States, and it's such a diverse Muslim population. If you're going, I think that maybe there need to be some hard and fast questions, even when you're courting. I mean, this whole idea of oral stimulation, You need to know whether or not your partner is into that or open to it, or it's a deal breaker right away. Because the thing is that you don't want to go into a relationship and it's just like that is something that you want and your partner just will not provide, because that I've heard that happening in Muslim relationships, and that partner is very resentful
And there's
that you're not
also,
getting that kind of gratification. I think before marriage, listen,
and the reason why there's also an issue because there are a number of men, Muslim men, and obviously Muslim women who are engaging in oral sex, but they're not having penetrative sex. So they're like, okay, I'm not committing zina, zina is in penetrative sex, but they engage in oral sex, or even some engage in anal sex. So that's why again I think it's important that these types of this, and that's why some men are used to, because they might have gone X amount of years receiving oral sex, they enjoy it, and obviously now they're married, they want to continue, and then maybe the wife isn't comfortable doing it because she hasn't been engaged in those type of activities. So I think that's why it's important to kind of have these discussions and understand it as young as possible. But again, making sure that education is age appropriate.
well, education, and also will always come down to personal choice, because you can know what fellatio is and still not want to. You can know it's okay and still not want to do it. You can know what cunnilingus is and still not want to do it. At the end of the day, and your partner needs to know that. And because you don't explore each other sexually before marriage, okay. I think that some of these tough questions need to be asked, because we know that it exists. We know that this difference of thought when it comes to things like that, like oral stimulation exists. We need to be talking before marriage. Listen, this is what I need. Nah, baby, I don't do that. Okay, well, you know what, brother? I have to kind of decide whether or not you're gonna still be the one. I may have to just be like, nah, next. And some women may do that, and some men may do that, because it's an important part of their sexual life. Honor yourself as a sexual being, okay, and be honest with your partner.
Is,
After marriage, you definitely have to be honest.
is there still stigma attached towards oral sex in the black community in America? The reason why I'm saying that is
I
because
don't. I can't speak in generals.
sorry, no,
I
because
can't speak in generals. I can't
okay,
say yeah, yes or no. I
I mean,
know that
the reason why I'm saying this is because it happens in the UK, and I've heard this. This is what happens in some African American communities, or amongst African American men, that women of other races, especially particularly white women, are more not only adventurous, but they're more likely to perform or kind of fellatio, whereas a lot of African American women are more reluctant to do it unless they're married or in like a long term relationship.
well, I think you're talking about millions of people.
It's not always the case. Again, I'm not saying there's a blanket statement that no African American woman, you know, engages in oral sex, but it's this idea that women of other races do it more than for example, an African American woman or a Black British woman in the UK context.
I mean, the UK is relatively small compared to the United States. And there are a lot of African American subcultures. So even when you're talking about the African American Muslim subculture, there's nuances to that as well. So to kind of like, I think those are stereotypes. I think there's stereotypes, and I think it's just another reason to kind of like say, I don't want to be with a black woman because she won't go down.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. No, honestly, that was the next thing I was going to say, because that's what some men say. That
Yeah,
they don't want
that's
to be
another.
with.
Yeah, she's always mad. She's emasculating, and she won't go down. So
No,
yeah,
but just in relation to oral sex, honestly, that is something which some
yeah,
black men say, that black women do not
yeah.
engage in oral sex, therefore they're rather go, and black women do, not
Who
all,
are these black men that you're talking? These brothers are lost.
no, no, a lot of black men do have said this, and I've heard this both not only in the UK but across the Atlantic in America. I've heard this, but the problem is that a lot of men won't. We don't have these kind of discussions, because I'm sure a lot of women will say that's not actually the case. But some women do say, yeah, we're not like, because I've watched some topical like programs in America, and the black women, when they're speaking ill of like white European women, they say they engage in those type of acts. We don't do it unless we're committed to the person or in a relationship or married. Whereas maybe some women of other ethnicities, again, I'm generalizing, but they may be a bit more open to engage in these acts. Do you
No,
understand?
there are definitely white female subcultures that will not do it.
Right.
Okay. And again, you're talking about subcultures and what's the messaging that's in those subcultures when it comes to things like this. And in the small subculture where that I navigate through with African American Muslim women, the DJ Khaled thing, they were up in arms because they were like, "Are you kidding? This is happening?" It is definitely not something that is off the table for a lot of them. But there'll definitely be African American Muslim women where it is off the table. There'll definitely be African American women where there is off the table. There'll definitely be white American women where it is off the table. I think that men need to kind of stop thinking in those kind of absolutes when it comes to sex. And I also feel like when you start to have those stereotypes, it's often used to categorize people and place them in specific social spheres. So a white woman is always sexually adventurous and willing to do everything, and she'll go down on you, and it'll be great. But an African American woman won't, a black woman won't. That's absolutely ridiculous. And that's not, first of all, that's not the way that human beings have sex. It's like, you don't have like this cattle prod of, this group because of their race gives head and this group because of their race doesn't. That's absolutely ridiculous. And it's indicative of the immature way that some people navigate through sex. And I think Muslim men in particular need to grow up when it comes to that. And if Muslim women are kind of like navigating, just making decisions about men based on these stereotypes, they need to grow up as well and realize that people are individuals, especially when it comes to intimacy. Nothing gets more tailored and specific than intimacy. So no, I don't. They'll buy into that. Don't drink that Kool-Aid. We need to talk. We need to learn. We need to be honest with our partners. We need to be educating our youth and and having open and honest conversations with each other. It's got to be a consistent thing, and it has to be a constant thing, because the dysfunction that stems from it is damaging to the individual, to the family, and to our communities. So I think that that's the most important thing that we kind of have to start really doing. And we have to clap back on stuff like this DJ Khaled mess. I mean, if he wasn't Muslim, it would have just been like another blip. But the fact that he's Muslim and it extended into conversations in Muslim social media spheres is significant. And so it was something that needed to be addressed. And I'm really grateful that you took the time out to address that. And we had a lot of viewers. I had more viewers than I ever had before. Quite a few of them stayed on. It's been an hour and a half. We need to wrap it up. Jazakallah, Habib. And I'm sure there'll be another one down the pike where I have to ask you, can you believe that this happened? Shout out to Heart Women and Girls, a great organization that is committed to stemming sexual abuse and raising awareness about sexual abuse and sexual health all overall. So a shout out to them. They do great work, and check out their website as well. Jazakallah Habib, and everyone who stayed on for so long. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.